Hello, everyone. Welcome to CommunityForce webinars. My name is Mehreen Mirza. As most of you already know, I am going to facilitate this webinar and will be answering your questions during the Q&A break. Now, as you all know, this is a special webinar, and we are very excited to share the 11.1 version with all of you. This update is just enhancements, not many new functionalities, as Christine will be explaining. Is designed to enhance your user experience and boost your overall efficiency. As a part of our commitment to all of our users, and keeping in mind the admins need to be updated with how the new features, these enhancements work, this webinar is going to be extremely beneficial to all of you. While we wait for everyone else to join, let us show you how you can use this webinar to ask questions and access the handouts. Now, as you can see, there is a panel on the right-hand side of your screen with an arrow. Please use that arrow to that is represented in an orange box to collapse or open the panel. There are two copies present today, not one. So there's a copy of today's presentation that contains, how the functionalities work, and also the help guides. There is also another document that you can download, that is the 11.1 release notes. You're going to really benefit from both these documents. Please make sure to download these copies as well. Also, you have a question area where you can type in your questions and click on send or enter. We will receive your questions and answer them during the Q&A break, or I will type them in while Christine is giving the explanation. Now, all of you will also be put on mute to avoid any confusion during this webinar. I think, let's see how many of you have joined. Okay, the numbers are increasing, but let's have everyone join. So let's start with what we have today. We have our amazing Christine Smith, as we all know by her voice. Most of us already know her from years. She is going to be our trainer for today, and I will be facilitating this webinar and assisting her during the Q&A break. The duration for this webinar is 1 hour. So I will pass down this mic to Christine. All yours, Christine. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for joining.
And thank you, Maureen, also. So let's go ahead and get started. We do have a lot to cover. So just to get a nice introduction, like Maureen said, we are very excited about this new features that are being released. And so, of course, we're going to be covering an overview of what those features are. And so who, of course, is going to benefit from this webinar? This is going to be all of you administrators who are responsible for maintaining and using the site. So the topics we're going to be covering are some of the new enhancements. So we have some new functionality. We're going to talk about our grant site. So if any of you are using the Grant United platform, then we're going to cover that new functionality that's been added. If you're using that Manage Members functionality, we're going to talk about that, some functionality that's been added to that. And then we'll jump to the scholarship site probably for the remaining of the presentation in regards to some of the new functionality that's being added for 11.1. Now, even though we switched to the scholarship site during the process today, those functionalities are also available to you grant users as well. So don't feel like this new functionality here is the only thing that's going to be applying to you. All of the other elements that we're going to be talking about today also will be a benefit as well. But we're just going to be going to the scholarship site because that's where the majority of our presentation is created on. So we'll talk about application build. There's been some functionality added to that in regards to cloning of questions, conditional logic, fun criteria, automated scoring. We're going to be talking about all of that that's been added to the site. And then a little bit of a navigational change that's been added we'll go over. And then for your applicants that are applying, the user experience, there's going to be a few things for like the reviewers, the scoring rubric screen, and then some changes in how a registration can happen with cell phones, since we have that ability now to be able to do messaging, and so how to capture cell phones if you're using that functionality, as well as the submit process, the screen that the applicants see. We made a slight adjustment to that. And then of course reporting, we have the export to automated scoring report. A lot of you weren't aware of what that report does, so we're excited to show you how you can export that. And then global reporting, we've added the ability to see active and archive applications, so we'll show you how to set that up. And then we've also enhanced our security with the reCAPTCHA. So we have multiple areas now where they see that in regards to creating registrations and logging in. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first section here on the grant site. And so, of course, the grant management site is for our grant users. If you're a granting organization and you use our grant platform, then these are some of the new functionalities that are being added in regards to that manage member functionality. So if you're using manage members, that's where you have the organization, and of course your organization may have multiple people coming in to apply. We now have enhanced that so that you can keep track of individuals better that are part of the same organization. So what you can have added to the site, and this is something that if you want to have it added, that you do want to reach out to CommunityForce's client support by entering a support ticket. But what this functionality does is it creates a listing so that when the applicants first log in, when they go to put their organization in, then they're going to see a list of organizations to choose from. And then of course, if they don't see their organization, they would have to reach out to you. You as the admin can add it, and then it'll be available for them going forward. So let's go ahead and go to the site so you can kind of see what the applicants will be seeing, how you can manage them organization names as the admin. And so let me just get to the site here. Let me go to my grant site. And first of all, what I'm going to do is log out so you can see how the applicants, when they go to create their account, so when they create new account, you'll see here that there's an organization listing now. And from this listing, they can find their organization, select that name, and then once they select the name, it will then link them to that organization. And then they will now be the primary member of that organization will be able to see that person in their listing. They'll be able to see they create an account. They won't have to have where you as the admin have to create the account for them. When they create their account, they can select the organization and it'll automatically put them to that organization's membership listing. So how do you create this list? So you do have the ability to add to this list. So how do you do that? So let me go ahead and log out here and log in as the admin. So when you're logged in as the admin, you're going to notice when you activate this functionality under the administration tab, you are going to see manage organizations. So just so you can kind of see how this functions, which you're going to like, is right now I'm in the setup user accounts. So in the past, if an organization changed its name, you as the admin would have to go in and you would have to locate that organization. So if I go here, I'm going to just put in CommunityForce here real quick and search. And so say here I have this CommunityForce testing org number 4. So let's say they took the number 4 off and they no longer need that. So how can I quickly adjust this? Well, if I go out here to the manage organizations, this is where that list, when they're creating their user account, this is where the list is coming from. So to create a new organization, of course, to add to that list, you would click add organization and then just put the name in and hit save. and then it would create that organization. So then all of your applicants that come in from that organization, they would then have their name here. So you can pre-populate this with all the organizations. If you know all the organizations, I know a lot of you, if you're United Ways, you maybe do a pre-vetting of your organizations. So as soon as they've been vetted, before they create a user account on the site, you can come here and create their organization name. It's then in the listing, and then when they go to create their user account, then they'll see that in the drop-down listing. So that's one thing. So you add the names to this so that they show up on that listing. But then also, if they do an organization change, then all you have to do, so remember I looked at that one and I had the org4, CommunityForce testing org4. I can come here and I can click the edit, and I can come and I can just remove this 4 and then hit save. And now that name will be adjusted. And you'll notice here, if I come in here and I go to set up users, and then I go and I search on CommunityForce, search, all of those that had the 4, that number has now been removed. So it makes an automatic change to all of those. Now, one thing you did notice in the manage organizations, there was the delete functionality. So if I wanted to delete the organization name, so let's say this name, I wanted to delete it completely, then if you delete it, it's going to remove it from all of those users that have it. And then of course you would then have to manually go in, if you created a new name, go in and manually add that. So that's where the edit is very helpful, is don't delete it completely, make the edit, and then as you're making the edit, it will make the changes appropriately. So that's the manage organizations, how you can manage those organizations. Now, another added functionality we added to the site here, so I'm gonna click through these screenshots here, is the new member registration. So every time a new member registers with an organization, so when I say register, they go in, they create a user account, and they select that organization, they create the account. Once they create the account, the primary member of that organization, whoever's the primary users, are going to get an email sent to them notifying them that an individual from their organization created an account. So that way they can go in and do any modifications themselves, of course, with that managed member. So that email that goes out is an email that's available. It's an email that you can adjust. You can change the language on so that it fits your organization's message. And then of course, when the applicant creates their account, they're going to get a message that says, thank you for registering. The organization you entered already exists. So they create the organization, and then the primary member is going to get an email. So what's that email? How do you get to that email? And of course, again, this is also a functionality that you'll have to request to be turned on. So to get to that email, if I go back to the grant site, in the administration tab under the Global Notification Center here, you're going to see an organization new member registration. So that organization new member registration, that's the email that's going to go to the primary user, letting them know that a new member has registered with their organization. So that's that new functionality for the grant site users. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the application build process functionalities. And like I said, we will be jumping to the scholarship site to discuss them. So the first one we want to talk about is cloning the funding program name. So we now have the capability, when you're in the manage application funds and you have that listing of funds, we now have the ability to clone funds. So when I talk about cloning funds, we will go to the scholarship site now. And like I said, this is the same functionality for scholarship users as our grant users. And so I'm here in Manage Application Funds. And here's our funding list. So maybe I have a fund that I know comes up multiple times, like this one here. This one, maybe I'm getting a new fund. It's very similar to this fund. So I want to go ahead and clone this fund and then just make the adjustments. Those of you who are using posting funds, and so from year to year, you have to create a new posting fund. Um, and so when you create that fund, of course, in the past, so you couldn't clone it. So then you had to go in and manually adjust everything. Well, now we have the ability to where you can clone those. So to clone a fund, it's very simple. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to move all the way over here to the right-hand side here. And you're going to see this little icon here. And this is a cloning icon. So if I want to clone this fund, then I just select it. And then it's going to give us a name. And so once it gives you the name, you can then make the adjustment. Make the name, hit clone and edit. If I hit clone, then it would just make an exact replica. But if I do clone and edit, what it does is then opens up the screen so that I can make the modifications for this specific fund. So I've cloned the funds now. And so now I can go in, make my adjustments, set my annual budget fiscal year amounts, and then make any adjustments needed for that specific fund. And then I can, once I've made all of my adjustments, then I can just hit save and exit, and then that fund will be created. And now I have that new fund created. So that's what the fund cloning does. So I know many of you have always wanted to be able to clone funds, so I know that will make you happy to know that that is here. Okay, so that's with the fund setup. Now we've got another functionality that we're going to discuss here, and that is in regards to cloning questions. So, of course, you're all excited. I know we've heard from many of our users that they want to be able to clone questions. So, guess what? We now have that available for you. So, I know you'll be excited about it. So, to clone a question, I'm going to go back out. I'm going to go to my home screen, and this is going to be in your application setup. So, if I go to my site here and I go into application settings, and then when I'm in application settings here, if I go, let's go into here. Let's say I have a question that's repetitive. So if you have activity sections, you might have like here I've got name of activity, number of years, description of activity. So I have this repeated several times. So now I can actually clone this question so I don't have to keep typing it over and over. I can come over here, hit the clone, and then it'll say, how many times do you want to clone this question? Well, if I'm asking it multiple times, then I would put 3 times. In our illustration, of course, I'm just going to hit 1 for 1 time. And then what it's going to do, it's going to create a copy of that, and it's going to put it at the bottom of the page. And so now I have the clone of that one that I just created. Notice it did put a 1 in front of it. And then, of course, it did make new XML name for it so that it was unique to this specific question. And then, of course, I needed to make a change to that question. I would just need to click on it, open it up, make the adjustments, and go forward. So now all of those questions, it's now been cloned, and that's how you do that. It's that simple. Now, what about the logic? Well, we've also added the ability to duplicate the conditional logic. Now, we've done 2 additions. So the first one we're going to talk about is duplicating the lines within the criteria. So when you have criteria, some of you out there might have where you're building criteria on a question that's for fund eligibility, and maybe there's one field that has multiple replies that you want that question to show or to be present on. And so now we do have the ability to duplicate questions within the conditional logic. So what I mean about that is, if I go back to the site here, within a question here, let's go to a scholarship availability section because that's the one that's going to make the most sense to you because that's where you would be probably doing this. So here I have scholarships available. And I have this specific question here, and I want to add to this. So I want to add another question to be asked pertaining to this specific funding. I've got these two questions built. And so in my illustration, I have this one here. Do you have 12 credit hours? So I have the criteria for this built here. There it is. And within this criteria, I want to add maybe here I have an academic career. I want to add maybe another line because now there's two different areas that they're now eligible for. So all I have to do then is hit the duplicate button here. And then it's going to say, how many times do you want to duplicate this line? So maybe you need to add 3 more lines for that specific criteria. So you would put the number. I'm just going to do 1. And then you'll notice as soon as I did that, it put it right underneath that. And then that's where, of course, you're going to want to make sure you get your ands and your ors in the right functionality done. But you want to make sure if it's all part of that same area that you get your groupings correct as well. So that's how you add that. Then, of course, if I wanted to delete what I just added, which I do, I just want to delete that. I can just simply click delete if I've added too many. And then once you're done with your criteria, you can go ahead and hit save. So that's within the criteria question. So that's where you can build it. Within it, you can duplicate that line and have multiple lines of criteria for that specific field. Now the next portion with conditional logic is in regards to the actual cloning of logic from one question to another. So here I have this question. And of course, like I was saying, I have the logic built on this and I have the logic built on this. So I have it built. I don't want to spend another probably 20 minutes to build it on this question. So what can I do? Well, we now have the ability to clone. So do you have 12 credit hours? So I can select that line. I can come up here to more options, clone conditional logic. What's the area where I want to clone, what question do I want to clone the logic from? So this is going to be the logic from my scholarships available section. And I want to clone it from this AJG question. I want that same logic put onto this question. See how simple that was? It's that quick. So there's the question. And now if I open this up, you're going to see there's that logic and it's there ready to go for that specific question. So I don't have to re-enter it. So if I had like 3 questions, I only have to build it on the one and then clone it on the other 3 questions. So that is for the duplicating of the conditional logic on a question. Now, another place you can duplicate logic now is you can duplicate logic within sections. So from one section to another, you can now clone the logic from one section to another. So maybe you have a section and you've built that section and you have another section that you need to show based on the same criteria as the previous section. So you built 2 sections and maybe it's for scholarships. If they've matched to a specific scholarship, then that scholarship, they need to have a certain form just for that, 2 different forms that they need to fill out. So you've created 2 sections. So now you can clone the logic from section A to section B. And so to do that, of course, we would do that from the section level. So I'm going to go out here. I'm still in application settings. I'm now looking at my sections. And so in order to clone the logic, I would create my section and then select the section that I want to clone. So here's my section I've created. Now I'm going to go over here and select it. Select. And then I'm going to scroll up. So I want the same logic that's on this line here, this conditional logic here, to be on this line here. So I'm selecting the line I want to put it on. I'm going to scroll up. I'm going to hit this drop down. And here it's going to say clone section conditional logic. So that's the one we want to click on. And then it's going to say, what section do you want to clone the logic from? So I'm going to find the section, this one, clone. Clone. And now when I go to this clone, it's going to have the logic built on it from that previous section. See how simple that was? Nice. Okay, so that's section conditional logic cloning. Now let's talk about fun criteria. So you've created a new fun. And within that fun, pardon me here, so you have cloning fun criteria from one fund to another. So you've created a new fund. And that fund that you created has very similar, almost the exact criteria as another fund. Well, you can now take that first fund that you had already had built, and you can clone the criteria from that fund down to the new fund that you just created. So to do that, we're going to go to the site. And this is when you have a one-to-many application process and you're building all that criteria. So the first thing you're going to do is in the assign applications funds, you're going to make sure that you add that fund. Then you're going to go to the manage funds criteria. Now, if you're using the automated functionality, you're going to love how this works, because when you're using automated funding criteria in the past, you would first have to go to the when you wanted to add criteria for a new fund, you would have to go to the application settings. You would have to open up that section name. You would have to go to the question that you were building the criteria on. You'd have to go to every single question and add that fund to the criteria. So for instance, gender here. If you're using the automated fund setup, you would have to go in and make sure that the criteria was added here and that fund was selected. With the cloning functionality, however, you don't need to come and do that first. If you're cloning it from one fund to another, then the system's going to do all that for you in the background. So if you go to Manage Funds Criteria, and let's see, what fund do I want to clone? So I have a fund here. And that's the one that has the information on it. So this is this criteria. Those are all the questions. And so what I want to do is on this question, this is my new fund. And so when I go to that new fund, right now there's no criteria. But I want to build the criteria. And like I said, I don't want to have to go to all those questions, add that fund, then come here, build my criteria, because this specific funding source is very, very similar. So how can I do that? Well, all I need to do here is select the fund that I want to clone. This clone fund criteria is going to say, what fund do you want to clone from? I'm going to select it, click existing criteria will be overwritten. So what it's telling me that any criteria that's in this is going to be overwritten. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. And now when I look at it, it's now got that criteria. So that's how it builds it. So it built an exact replica of that other fund. And what else it did, if you'll notice, this is the Christine clone test. If I go back, let's find that gender question, you're going to see that what it did is it went ahead and added to the gender question automatically because I cloned it. You're going to see in this drop down here, it now selected that name. It's now selected and it's done all that for me. I didn't have to go do that manually. Now, let's say I've cloned a question and maybe the criteria is I've cloned the fund, excuse me, but maybe that criteria on the new fund is just a little different. And so I need to delete some of the criteria. Now, at this stage, if you need to add criteria, you do need to go to the question and add it to the question, because this is, there's nothing there. You do need to go to the question and add it if it's an additional line that wasn't in the one you cloned. But maybe there's one you need to delete. You can actually delete the criteria. So if I go back to Manage Funds Criteria and I go into that clone, and maybe that doesn't have the gender, I can actually come here, delete that criteria, and it will automatically delete it from the actual fund. I can hit save and exit, and then I can go back up here, and then you'll notice it'll now delete that specific line. It will no longer have the criteria build here. Where are you? There you are. And I do not have to come back here and make sure I remove it. It automatically does that when you delete that. So that's how the new functionality for fund criteria cloning works, as well as deleting of the fund criteria. Now, another area where we have added the ability to clone is within automated scoring. So with automated scoring, you can clone fields, and that's the first thing we're going to talk about. So within a automated score, so if we go to evaluations, manage automated scoring, I select a scoring here. Let's pick this one. I think there's scores on that. Okay, so here I'm building my criteria, and let's say I'm building it and I have multiple scores for the same field. So I can come over here on this field here. Now let's do this one since I've already got some built here. Let's click the duplicate. Let's do that one. And now I can say here it is. I'm making a duplicate. So when I hit duplicate, it opens this up. And now I can add, let's say I want to do 1 to 1.99. And then I'm going to give them a score of 20. Or we'll give them a score of 2. And then hit save and exit. And now you will see there's that new score that I just created. It created another one, another duplicate. So that's how you can duplicate within the specific fund. Now we also have the ability to duplicate automated scoring from one fund to another fund within the same application. So to do that, what you would do is open up the fund you want to clone from. So I have this AHL scholarship, and I want to clone the scoring from this fund to another fund. So I open this up, and it says, what's the source scholarship? So what's the source fund that I want to clone from? So I'm going to say I want to clone from the AHL. What's the target? The target is going to be, let's say I want it to be this one. I'm going to select it. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to hit clone. And now when I go to this clone test, you're going to see as soon as I selected it, it now has that criteria that I just built is now going to be here as well for that same application. within the same application. So this fund and the other fund both have the same criteria. And then of course, then I can go add to this criteria if it does, maybe have some additional criteria for that automated scoring, I can go ahead and add that there. So that's the cloning of the automated scoring. Now, one more thing we wanted to talk about before we break is the change in our navigation, just a minor little change in the navigation, and that's in regards to the manage applicants. So in the past, when you clicked on the name of the fund, or you clicked on the number of applicants applied from that home screen, it took you to the graph. So the minor adjustment we made is now what it does is when you're in the home screen and you click on the application name itself, it's going to take you directly to the Manage Applicant listing. If you're on the home page and you select the number of applicants that have applied, it's going to take you to that graph of how many pending submission and so forth, and then you would have to go to the Manage Applicant. So that's just a little change we made in the navigation to make that a little bit easier, so that if you wanted to see the graph, you could by selecting the number, but if you want to just go to the Manage Applicant screen, then all you got to do is click the name and it'll automatically take you there. So we're going to take a quick break here and address any questions that may have come through. And so I'm going to pause here, and we're going to turn the mic over to Maureen, and she'll answer any of those questions. It's all yours, Maureen.
Thank you so much, Christine. Yes, we do have a couple of questions. The first question is related to the manage organization, the enhancement on the grants platform. So the question is when the manage organizations functionality is activated. So here's the thing. You have to reach out to Zendesk and have our team enable it from the backend. So it's configurable. It is not going to be enabled directly on every site that gets upgraded to the 11.1. Okay, reach out to our team once it gets upgraded. So the question is, once it is enabled, does the list include all current organizations present on your site? Yes, absolutely. All of the currently existing organization names will get updated into that list. So when your applicant is creating their account, that list is already available. Okay. Another question is, where is that? New member registration. Again, the email template that we're talking about. The question is, can I have a separate email template for the new member registration? As Christine has showed, it is under administration, where the email is sent to the primary contact of the organization, right? Once the newer member under the organization registers. Can I have separate email templates for separate programs in the system? Probably the user has, the admin has different programs, caters to different organizations. Likewise, the thing here is no, it is a site-wide notification email template. So it's not application specific. Once you make changes to that email template, it is done for all of your applications. So any primary user of the organization will receive the email, whether they are applying for one fund or another fund. Okay, I hope that is clear. Just a second. Well, there are a couple of other questions. So this is regarding the fund cloning, right? The managed application funds where we are cloning, as Christine has showed. If you just click on clone, right? And not clone and edit, will the system take the previous year's budget as well? For example, you have the annual budget for each fund, right? Will it take the budget as well if you just click on clone? Okay, Christina is trying to show us that button. Okay. If you don't click on clone and edit and just click on clone, the system will automatically take everything, including the contact. If you have a contact associated with that fund, the contact will get added. But one thing I would like you all to go back and check is the fiscal year or the academic year. Once you have cloned the new fund, please go back and update the academic year or the fiscal year. Okay, if you're on the scholarship side, then of course you will be updating the academic year. If you're on the grant side, you will be updating the fiscal year. There is one more question. if I need to add additional criteria beyond what we have cloned, so this is related to the eligibility criteria that we are cloning, right? Uh, we can we can still add more eligibility criteria to the already existing criteria that have just been cloned. Yes, absolutely. You will be able to add additional, edit the existing ones. Maybe like Christine has shared, the gender question. If there are more options that you have added, please go ahead and change the options on the criteria as well. And you want to add more criteria to the eligibility criteria that you've just cloned into the new fund, you can do that as well. Okay, sorry, Christine, you were showing something. Okay, there
I
are.
was just going to say, when you add a criteria,
Mhm.
you do, if there's a question that's part of the new criteria on the new fund, that question isn't there, you can't do that within the managed fund criteria. You have to first go to the question in the application settings, add it to the question, and then it'll show up on the criteria to where then you
Okay,
can add the
all right.
appropriate values. So
Thank you
you do
so
have
much,
to, if
Christine.
you're adding a line that wasn't part of the criteria, and it says question that's not in the criteria that you can duplicate within it, if it's not a question that's already been built on that criteria, it's a brand new question for that new fund, then you do need to go to application settings, go to the question if you're using the automated functionality, select it, and then it'll show up in the criteria, and then you can add it that way. You still have to do that for a one that's not there at all after you've cloned, if that makes your, if that
Yes,
answers the question.
yes, yes. Thank you so much, Christine.
You're
I
welcome.
think I have answered all of the questions. Neil, I will answer your question in the question box. All right. Back to you, Christine. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Maureen, for answering those questions so clearly. So now let's go ahead and go on. We have a few little things in regards to some items that have been, some small little items that have been added. So let me move this out of my way here, and let's talk about what those are. So the first one we want to talk about is in regards to the scoring rubric and our reviewers. So in the past, when a reviewer was creating their score, was completing their scorecard, and you had a question where they needed to upload a file, they weren't able to delete that. So now we have added the ability to delete those files. So just when they're in the scorecard, they can hit the delete the file that they've attached, and then they can reattach another one. So we've added that functionality to be able to do that. The next thing we've added is in regards to the applicant screen. So when an applicant completes an application form, and once they, click the submit, they've completed the form, they click the submit, they get the screen to preview. And before this, please check the checkbox to confirm that you've reviewed. This here was at the top of the page. And so then the applicants didn't have to scroll through, review the form. They were able to just open it, select the checkbox, and go, and bypass reviewing the form because it was at the top. Well, we've now moved it to the bottom, so that in order to get to it, they do, of course, they have to scroll through their application PDF, review it if they want, and then they select it at the bottom and then hit the resubmit. And so that's been the change there. It's been moved to the bottom. Now, the next item is for those of you who are using the cell phone field when a new applicant registers. We have set up the functionality to be able to capture those cell phone numbers and make it whether it's required or not required. So depending on what you want, you can contact us and we can get that set up for you. If it is required, what it's going to do is when the applicant registers, so that cell phone field that's there, if it's required, it's going to have a star. And what's going to happen if I go to the site here, let me log out of the scholarship site, log out. And when I log in and go to create a new account, if it's required, what's going to happen, this little, you're going to see here, it's going to have a red asterisk. But also when I enter a number in there, it's going to give me this little button. And what it's going to do is verify that cell phone number is correct before it allows them to create their registration. So they click the send OTP code. It's going to send a code to them. Before they can even create their registration, they have to enter that code to verify that that is a valid cell phone number. They can't put a fake number in there. They have to put a real number in and validate that number. That way you're not going to get a wrong number and then they won't be getting their text messages. So that's just a nice little verification that we've set up there for that. And then of course this can be required or not required depending on what you want for your applicants. We've also made some adjustments to some of our reporting. Now, some of you weren't aware that this was here, so we just wanted to make sure, bring the news to you that it is available. In the automated scoring report, some of you know that have been using this, but what is there, and we wanted to bring this to your attention. Let me get out of here and log in as an admin. And I'm going to go in on this one because I know there's data here. If I go to manage reports and I go to my automated scoring report and I'm looking at the results, I'm going to select this one here. So I have my automated scoring report. Now there's a export to Excel here. And what this is nice about is, of course, you have all these scores, but you have the score here and you want to know what the breakdown is. So in the past, you wanted to look at it, you might have just clicked on this and saw it for each individual user. But the export to Excel, what it does, in case you didn't know that that was there, is you can click the export to Excel. It'll export those scores, create the report for you in an Excel spreadsheet. And as soon as it opens here, what it will do is give the breakdown. Of course, this one doesn't have, but the one here, it'll give you the breakdown. So this is, they got 3 on this one and they didn't get any on this one. And so then the total score, of course, what's the total score? So this here is going to give you the total, and then it's going to give you a breakdown for each one of those criterias that you built for that automated scoring. It's going to give you a column for each one of those so that you can see the breakdown for everybody across the board. So that's what that report does. Now, the other adjustment we made to our scoring, to our reports, sorry, is in regards to the global ad hoc reports. So now you have the ability in the global ad hoc reports, when you're creating those, you now have the ability to filter and bring in active or archived applications. You can filter and create reports on both of those. So to get to that, of course, what we're talking about is here in Global Reports. And when you're creating your report, so when you go create new report, we've added this line here, filter by application. So you can say include both active and archive, include just the active, or include active or include archived only. So you can do archived, you can do active, or you can do both. And then when you select them, then what it's going to do is give you the drop down of all of the applications that are active on the site, or depending on what you choose, of course. So that's just another filter that we added to those global ad hoc reports. Now, the last item I want to discuss that we've added, you probably saw it already, is the security feature in regards to the reCAPTCHA. So you're going to start, applicants, when they create accounts, when they log in, they're going to start seeing this more. And so we've added this to the sites. And so what happens, of course, is exactly what reCAPTCHA does. If everybody's ever created logins on other sites, they've seen this. But let me go to the grant site because I do want to address something else that's new on there. Let's log out, log in. And so if you're creating a login here, it may give it to you or may not. It depends on how many times you've logged into the site, but it will, when they create and enter the password and click login, the reCAPTCHA will appear there. If they create a new account, they're going to get the reCAPTCHA there as well. When they request a forgot password, they're going to get the reCAPTCHA there as well. So it's just a nice little security feature that allows the system to know it's not a fake it's not a robot creating the account, it's an actual live individual doing so. Now, one more thing I do want to address that wasn't on the agenda, that is when they create a new account, something that is out there as well. It's on my grant site, so I'm going to log out here and log in. There is a verification process now, create new accounts. And let me just create an account here so you can see what it does as well. And so this is something you can ask to be activated. I want this one right here. And log in. I'm going to do and so what's going to happen is it's going to create a verification and send it to that email address. Confirm. You'll see here in a minute. I'm not a robot. Submit. Hopefully I got the right email. And so they're going to get a verification code. It's going to send that verification to their email address, and then to finalize the verification process. And then once they enter that code, it'll create the account, and that account will be created. So I got the verification. Let's see here. They put it in, hit submit. Of course, this is the grant site, so I'm getting that message. Click OK. And now the account's been created, and then I can log in as necessary. So that's another new functionality, a new security feature as well as a verification on the email address that can be turned on. So that closes out our session for the day. So we have provided some of the resources. There are help guides on these in Zendesk that go into the details of what we've covered today. So anything that has a help guide built already, we did create the resources to that. We also attached to today's session the release notes that were given in regards to the new release, so details of everything, as well as we've uploaded a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation that gives you, of course, the detailed slides that I actually went into the sites and did them so that you could get a better feel of how it functioned, but they're all are detailed screenshots in the PowerPoint presentation itself as well. So you will receive a recording of today's session, everybody that attended, as well as if anyone registered, they should be getting a copy of it as well. There will be a survey that appears right after you close the presentation today, as well as that follow-up email that we always send in regards to the presentation. That will have a survey attached to it. It's the same survey, so if you miss it right after this, then it'll be attached to that email also. So again, we appreciate everyone attending. If you do have any questions or want to have a more detailed explanation regarding your processes and some of the new functionality and how it can benefit you, feel free to enter a support ticket and reach out to Zendesk and ask to have a meeting with one of our client support specialists, and they'll be able to sit down and do a process review with you. So again, thank you everyone for attending, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day, and thank you so much. Goodbye.